All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending this evening. My name is Emily Voss. I'm the Senior Manager of National Programs and Professional Development at the Center for Civic Education. And tonight we're happy to bring you a partnership program between the Center for Civic Education and the National Liberty Museum called Establishing a Climate, Culture, and Context for Civic Action. So we're really thrilled to be able to bring this partner program to you, which is intended to be a very empowering conversation over the course of the evening. So we'll hear from the National Liberty Museum first, followed by the Center for Civic Education. And so we'll cover some essential tools and skills needed to cultivate classroom environments for both younger students and students of all ages that will inspire them towards civic engagement and civic action. So with that, I would like to invite everyone over the course of the evening, if you have questions, please go ahead and use the chat feature. We are happy to take questions as we go, and also we will leave plenty of time for questions at the end. But we look forward to learning with you over the next hour or so. And with that, let me go ahead and hand things over to Jenna Schutte from National Liberty Museum.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. And thank you to the Center for Civic Education for reaching out to us about this opportunity and for the collaboration. We're so excited to be here and share some resources from our museum and then see how they really merge well with some of the resources that the Center for Civic Education has available as well. So I'll start off by introducing myself and talking a little bit about our museum. As Emily said, my name is Jenna Schutte. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement at the National Liberty Museum. I've been at the museum for the past 2 years, starting in about June 2021. I oversee our school programs for students and teachers and our museum programs for more of a public audience. Before coming to the National Liberty Museum, I was the education manager at Historic Philadelphia, a nonprofit organization in the city that also does historical programming. I graduated from Monmouth University in New Jersey with a bachelor's in history and secondary education and a master's in history. I have a really strong background in education, and even though my career didn't really take me into a traditional school environment, I'm really thankful that I still get to work with teachers and students in my current role, and that I'm able to use some of those skills in a really fun and unique way. I'll tell you a little bit about our museum in a bit and how we prepare students and teachers for civic action. But before I do that, I want to shout out my other team members who are also on the call today. We have Alexis Jennings, who is our museum educator and public programs associate. Tamia Alston Ward is our museum educator and interpretation associate, and Erin Dempsey is our museum educator and school programs associate. So all three of them are available to answer any questions or provide more information in the chat or offline. So thank you for being on the call today as well. Can you go to the next slide? So for today, for our portion, we're going to focus on the following learning objectives together. We're going to practice some creative and engaging strategies of introducing the concept of liberty and the 5 First Amendment freedoms in the classroom. We're going to look at some ways to manage students in the ideation and creation of a community constitution that's really centered in student voice and choice. We're going to learn a little bit about the concept of truth, especially in the context of civil discourse and meaningful dialogue, and how we can guide students in applying some norms and expectations to have that kind of dialogue. But before we dive in, I want to share a bit about the National Liberty Museum. So to provide some context for our content today, the National Liberty Museum is located in Old City, Philadelphia. We've been around for over 20 years, having opened our doors in January 2000. The museum is the culmination of the life's work of our founder, Irvin Borowski, who was a lifelong Philadelphian, a distinguished publisher, an art collector, a philanthropist, and the youngest son of Polish immigrants. In creating and founding the National Liberty Museum, he was really seeking not just to present a collection of art and artifacts, but really to illustrate that liberty is a fragile concept and that the survival of liberty requires us to understand, respect, and actively engage with each other. More than 2 decades from our opening day, we're in the midst of a really significant transformation that's included an interpretive planning process that's really set the stage for us. And we're embarking on a 5-year strategic plan that's going to begin next year, where we're going to have some capital improvements to our building and a full reimagining of the museum's galleries and visitor experience. So beginning in 2020, when a lot of us were kind of starting at the National Liberty Museum, who are on the call today, after about 20 years of static galleries and displays, we launched a really ambitious series of changing exhibitions, one of which you're going to hear about tonight. And now we produce up to 4 exhibitions per year and really explore some complex issues connected to liberty through those exhibitions and programs. We really aim to be a place where people can develop skills for meaningful conversation, widening understanding, building empathy, resolving conflict, and collaborating on solutions with each other. We conceptualize liberty as an ongoing shared pursuit, and we're really committed to embedding this understanding into all of our operations and how we approach our exhibitions and programming. The next slide, you will see, as part of the work that we've been doing to prepare for the museum's future, we've also updated our mission and vision to better reflect our current content and our future endeavors. So the National Liberty Museum connects, educates, and inspires people to explore and advance the complex practice of liberty. And the National Liberty Museum is committed to building a society that values freedom of thought, civil discourse, respect for all people, and the essential pursuit of liberty. So you'll see how some of that comes to life with the things that we're doing now, and we're really excited to see where that will take us in the future as well. So what does all of that look like in our education programs? At the National Liberty Museum, we really produce active participatory learning experiences that provide the means and opportunity for people of all ages to put liberty into action in ways that are meaningful and relevant to themselves and to their community. We really try to prepare learners to engage with new ideas and perspectives, to think critically and creatively and collaboratively about some of the challenges that we experience today. One of the ways that we do that is through our Young Heroes Outreach program. We're going to be talking a little bit about some activities that we facilitate in that program. So I really wanted to provide a little bit of a context of what the program is. Education and student and teacher outreach has really always been an essential part of the National Liberty Museum from the very beginning. The year the museum opened, they launched the Young Hero Award, which recognized young people who demonstrated outstanding civic leadership and made an impact in their school or in their community. And then about 10 years later, that awards program spawned the Young Heroes Outreach Program. This is a year-long program that's implemented in classrooms across the region. It empowers students in grades 4 through 8 to identify social issues in the world, their country, their community, their school, and take action to create some positive change. The curriculum is rooted in civic action, research skills, media literacy, community engagement, civics and government, and responsible citizenship. So throughout the program, students apply this knowledge to research, develop, and implement an action project that addresses a social issue that's important to them and their community. Very similar to a lot of the programming that happens through CCE as well, but with a little bit of a younger audience. We've had classes do everything from upgrading green space at their school to launching awareness campaigns on gun violence, to organizing donation drives, to leading advocacy campaigns, and a lot more. The facilitation of the program really encourages student voice and choice and critical thinking, and incorporates project-based learning and social-emotional learning to best support student success in that program. Over the past 13 years, we've worked with over 65 participating schools, many of them returning for several years, mostly in the Philadelphia region, but also in the broader area as well. We've worked with over 13,000 students in more than 500 classes. which has resulted in more than 170 action projects. So we witnessed students really achieving some impressive goals, making some impactful change, and really inspiring them to become responsible and engaged citizens in their community. So before I dive into some of the activities and strategies that we use to establish those civic foundations, I really want to hear from all of you. So if you can respond in the chat, or feel free to unmute and share a little bit more if you'd like. How do you prepare your students to be responsible and engaged citizens? What do you currently do in your classrooms? Are there any programs that you run, projects that you do, any conversations that you like to have, any ways that you connect with your community? We'd love to kind of hear a little bit about that now. Give everyone some time to respond. Feel free to raise your hand as well if that's easier. Do we have any teachers on the call today that participate in the CCE programming? Awesome, Donna. Yeah, making sure things are connected to current events. I used to do that a lot when I was in school as well, and we do that in the Young Heroes Outreach Program, connecting students to things that are going on in the world today, for sure. Oh, that's great, Dennis. Current Event Fridays. Yeah, Virginia says teach them how every voice can make a difference, but it's even better if they find others to join them. That's great. We hear that a lot from students that participate in our programming, that they didn't realize that people as young as them could make a difference or have a voice that people would listen to. So that's always really wonderful to hear that we help to inspire that in some young people. Awesome. Thank you. Well, feel free to continue responding. I'd love to just hear what kinds of things you're facilitating in your classrooms. We can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about one of the activities that we use to kick off our program. So when we kick off our Young Heroes Outreach Program, we find it's important for students to have a really strong foundation of their rights and responsibilities, and the ways that they can use them as young people. I feel like a lot of times students think that a lot of our civic foundations really only apply to adults, or adults are the ones that can use them. So we really try to think about the ways that students can connect to these. We introduce them to these rights and responsibilities by examining our First Amendment freedoms, because we feel that they best represent the ways that we can really make change. So we first introduce them through some simplified definitions and putting them in the context of the larger Constitution and other civic foundations. But we also connect them to past student action projects and provide some real world examples of the ways that other young people, just like them, have used these rights to make positive change. And then throughout the rest of the program, we reflect back on these freedoms and connect them to the actions that they're taking and the ways that they're advocating for the things they support and believe in. Even though we take the language of the First Amendment and break it down into some simplified terms, it still takes some further exploration and application. So if you go to the next slide, to get them thinking a little bit more creatively, and to make these freedoms feel more relevant and accessible, we introduce an activity where students imagine the First Amendment freedoms as superheroes. We're working with 4th through 8th graders, so this is something that really excites them to think about this in a creative way. So we ask the question, what would our First Amendment freedoms look like if they were superheroes who fought against injustice and worked to ensure liberty for others? We invite them to name the hero, come up with a catchphrase, list some of their powers, and think about what they would look like and the types of situations that they would be in, all using their knowledge of the First Amendment freedoms as that foundation. So we're going to use a little imagination and creativity here ourselves. I'm going to ask everyone to think for a couple minutes about one of the First Amendment freedoms and create a member of our what we call Freedom Five, a superhero who exemplifies that freedom and fights to uphold its ideals. So as you're thinking, if you're creating a superhero that's based on, let's say, freedom of the press, what would their superhero name be? What is their catchphrase? What would some of their powers be? Do they have any tools? What do they look like? What kind of situations are they in? I'll give everyone about a minute or two to do some brainstorming, but then I would love to hear some of your initial ideas. And for our team as well, any ideas that you've heard from students of when this activity is facilitated in our classrooms. All right, as you're thinking of ideas, feel free to drop some in the chat. Or if you want to talk a little bit more about some of your ideas, you're welcome to unmute and share those with us.
That's good, Emily. I was gonna do a petition one too, and I was like, Petunia petition. I'm like, no, that doesn't even sound right. I like your petition prodigy. That's good. I'll go to my second choice. I'll put that one in next.
Perfect. Oh, that's awesome. I love that, Emily.
I feel like petition is like that least known, least appreciated.
It's definitely the one that our students get the most kind of hung up on, that and freedom of the press sometimes too, because of, newspapers aren't as prevalent as they used to be, and that takes a little bit more explaining too. We've seen some really creative drawings and superheroes in different situations when our kids have done this. So it's a fun way to just get them to think a little bit creatively and to apply this knowledge in a way that's a little bit non-traditional. It allows them to kind of use some different skills and to really make sure that they're applying their knowledge in a different way. This is great. When we facilitate this activity with students, we either invite them to create a full group of the Freedom Five, so they can learn about all five freedoms and put them into action. Or if time doesn't allow, students can just create one and then assemble a team together. We then take kind of a next step with it and have some scenarios that students can read through that deal with different First Amendment freedoms, and then choose which of the superheroes they would send to kind of participate in that situation or help that situation in some way, and kind of think a little bit creatively about what that storyline would look like of them addressing that issue. So feel free to drop some more in if you're still working on it, but I'm going to move on to our next topic for the evening. So, while it's fun to think creatively about some of these civic ideals, another great way for students to better understand them is to apply the skills and principles to their own life or their own classroom. So it's important for students to see themselves in some of the decision-making that happens in the classroom, and for teachers to value student voice and choice, especially working on a collaborative or long-term project like those in our Young Heroes Outreach program. Teachers who uplift student voice and choice in the classroom not only create an environment where students can engage in high-level learning, but it also creates a space where students are invested in and more responsive to and respectful of the content and the assignments that they're being given. In this type of classroom, students are much more communicative with the teacher and with each other, and often behave more positively and appropriately. So one of the most important and commonly used types of choice, especially in a project-based learning environment, is group choice, where learners work together in groups to design unique strategies and creatively solve some common goals. Student voice and choice also gives learners the opportunity to participate in a democratic process by bringing all the voices together. They can prove what they know and what they learned in a really unique way. They can often show their personal values and interests. They can choose the way they like to learn content by having that flexibility. They can apply their own skills and abilities to the things that they're doing, and they can really take responsibility for the outcomes of their learning. If you go to the next slide, one of the really best ways to set the foundations for this type of voice and choice from the very beginning, and then to reflect on the democratic process of the Constitution, we often invite teachers and students to create a community or classroom constitution. So either by a show of hands or dropping something in the chat, how many of you create some type of collaborative community agreement or classroom rules at the start of your school year, where you invite students to participate together? Yeah, it's a great way to kind of set those foundations from the beginning and to get students invested in their learning. If you already do this type of project but don't call it a constitution or integrate that content, it's a really easy way and relevant way to incorporate some of the civic thinking that you're learning into the classroom. So it could even be as easy as shifting language during that ideation process, using words and phrases like what rights should be protected, what governing groups should be established, should we allow for amendments? And then once it's completed, having a discussion about how it can support classroom-based civic action, meaningful dialogue, or long-term projects. So thinking about how will our community constitution help us have meaningful dialogue with each other? How will our community constitution guide us through group work and big projects? And how will our community constitution allow us to help others? So if you already create a community constitution or a classroom constitution, or even a set of classroom rules at the beginning, what are some things that are typically included in there? Feel free to drop in the chat or unmute and share. Or even our team, if you have heard anything come out of the classrooms where you're facilitating this, any of those kind of norms or rules that are typically established. Oh, Vicky says, agree to disagree. That's great. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that actually in our next piece. But that's definitely a good norm to have. Use facts, not emotions. That's great too. You're already previewing some of the things we're going to be talking about next, so that's a great segue. Yeah, Kelly says creating a safe space and demonstrating acceptance. That's great. Lexi's sharing leading with empathy. They notice that we all have different life experiences which impact our opinions, so understanding other people's perspectives is important. Check and double check sources. That's great. Oh, Erin's sharing here. She has a group that she works with that's an after school group, and they used the format of having the freedom to. So having the freedom to question, eat a snack, go to the bathroom when you need to, share new ideas. That's great. I like how it has a wide range too of different things that they want to have the freedom to do. That's awesome. Don't take things personally. Oh, that's great. I love that, Kent, the painting. I think I know exactly which one you're talking about. That's awesome. Yeah, we really try to kind of create this foundation where students feel like they have a voice and a say in what is going on in the classroom, and know that they have something to fall back on if things kind of fall off track or if something doesn't go right. They know that they can go back to this constitution and you know, use it to support something that they might believe in or want to be advocating for. I think it's also interesting when we hear about classrooms that do use amendments and make amendments throughout the year, things that they realize need to be changed or updated. And I think it's a really interesting jumping off point to talk about the amendments to our Constitution and why they're necessary and why we need to kind of keep that process going on a small scale and on a large scale. Awesome. These are great. Thank you so much. So shifting gears a little bit, with these civic foundations in place, it's also important to establish a classroom environment that's really conducive to social emotional learning, discussion, collaboration, engagement. And it's important for students to be presented with these frameworks and expectations as clearly and effectively as possible, and that they are implemented in all areas of instruction and learning, but especially in moments of tension, of conflict, or debate. And we explored a lot of these themes in one of our recent exhibitions, which was simply titled Truth. If you go to the next slide, this exhibition was open the entirety of last school year. So it really was a good foundation for some of our field trip programs. And we had a lot of students kind of come through and explore the exhibition and these themes in a really interesting way. So obviously, we all know at the heart of our social and political divides lie these questions of truth. How is truth defined? Who defines it? For what purpose? And our exhibition Truth used multiple lenses to bring these current thoughts, questions, and debates into focus. It was a really immersive and interactive space, and we brought in a community of thinkers and creators to help us to create and develop this exhibition. And we really aimed to provide tools to navigate and engage in these critical conversations. It really invited us to consider how this quest for truth helps to open our minds to new ideas and new perspectives, which then eventually leads to a more connected and understanding world. With students, it provided a really unique exploration into themes that are essential to civic engagement and understanding and positively changing the community around us. The meaningful dialogue piece of it was really essential in our field trip conversations and was really built upon these other foundations. And it was really essential to establish a classroom environment that's empathetic and responsible and engaged. So first, I'm curious to know from all of you, are there any ways that you currently facilitate meaningful dialogue with your students, especially in times of tension or conflict? Are there any ways that you facilitate those conversations? What do you currently do? Are there conversations that you have? Especially, how do you prepare for those moments of tension and conflict when students might be disagreeing with one another? I'd also be interested to hear from people if your tactics for this have shifted over the past few years, if there's anything that you kind of are realizing is more difficult to do in the classroom, and how you're kind of dealing with that. Does anyone currently facilitate any sort of debates with students or putting these conversations kind of in a more structured environment or format? Yeah, Tamia is saying to remind them that there are no winners and losers, especially in some conversations that, you know, people have really emotional reactions to, making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page from the beginning. That's important. Yeah, Kelly, including multiple perspectives and unheard voices, especially perspectives that students might not typically be exposed to. It's important. All right. One of the things that we're going to explore in a little bit, but something that can kind of help in these situations is finding topics that students might have a really strong emotional connection to, or feel really strongly about, things that are a little bit more neutral, so that they can practice those skills for meaningful dialogue without getting caught up in the content of the debate. But we're going to explore that actually a little bit in a little bit. So first, I want to talk a little bit about truth and how we introduce this concept to students. So as an introduction to the concept of truth and to get students thinking about different perspectives and experiences, we would kick off our field trip discussions by exploring 4 types of truth. So first, we would ask, what is truth? How do you know that something is true? And it seems like a pretty obvious answer. Students would typically respond first with something that is researched or backed by facts, which is a great answer, and thank God that that's what they're saying. But after thinking about it a little bit more, you can realize that it can be a little complicated. And exploring these different types of truth can get us thinking about different ways that something could be true. So for example, let's say that I have a sandwich in front of me. It's not random that I added a sandwich clip art on this slide. It's relevant to the conversation here. If it's a turkey sandwich, it would be true to say that this meal in front of me consists of bread, turkey, cheese, lettuce, tomato, mayo, whatever you would put on a sandwich. And if those are the ingredients of the sandwich, it would be an objective truth. It would be something that's just the facts without any personal feelings or judgment attached to it. If I said that turkey sandwiches are the best sandwich, that would be a subjective truth. It's true to me and through my perspective, my feelings, my opinions, but it may not be someone else's truth. If we're in different areas of the state or the country, this turkey sandwich may be called a hoagie or a sub or a hero, which would be a complex truth. It's something that is true to different people all at the same time. And then let's say we're vegan. We may say that it's wrong to eat this turkey sandwich that has meat and cheese on it. And that would be a normative truth. It's something that's based on a group's values and beliefs. So it's all of these statements are true in different ways. And we would facilitate a conversation with students and say, why do you think that is? Why do you think it's important to know that there are different types of truth that can exist? And it was a really fun way to get them kind of thinking about how all of these different things can be true at the same time, just in different ways, and how it's important to understand that there are people coming to a conversation with different types of truth. So from there, we can start thinking about how having meaningful dialogue, especially with someone who may disagree with you, is rooted in understanding different people's backgrounds, perspectives, biases, and truths. We can go to the next slide. So from here, we start to kind of dive into meaningful dialogue. So the free exchange of ideas is really a cornerstone in a successful democracy, and really essential to this process is exploring ideas through conversation and learning from other people. Some of those exchanges might come easy, but it's really the tough ones that hold the most value and really get you to learn something new. When we care about someone or something enough to have a really tough conversation, we communicate how much they mean to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't really bother engaging in that conversation. And the same holds true for being a caring citizen. So we begin by agreeing upon terms and definitions so that we know that we are talking about the same thing, like Tamia was saying. And before engaging in a meaningful dialogue, it's important to set some expectations. Don't assign bad motives. Most issues are complicated, and there's usually room for some disagreement. So when entering a conversation, try keeping any disagreement focused on the topic and not the person's identity. It's important to agree upon facts and terms. Clear communication is really vital for any type of conversation, and it's essential to agree on some basic facts and shared vocabulary so that the details can really be discussed and the issue at hand can be discussed. It's important to find common ground. So finding areas of agreement or shared values, even on topics that aren't related to each other, you can start to build empathy with the other person, and create an environment that allows people to accept new facts or even reconsider their stance on something. It's important sometimes to keep it private. Public settings, including in a digital space, can sometimes add pressure to conform or to feed into more of a mob mentality. So people are usually more open to accept different viewpoints in a more intimate or private setting. And then lastly, have realistic expectations. We often enter a conversation with the expectation that one side will be a converter to the other's way, and will win the conversation, but it should really just be a victory to come to an understanding, even if you still disagree with each other. And then while having the conversation, it's important to follow norms so the dialogue can actually be meaningful. It's important to show respect and suspend judgment. It's important to be an active listener. It's important to be honest, direct, and empathetic with the other person. And of course, it's important to keep your emotions in check. And for these rules to be effective, it's really important that everyone follow them and understand that in a meaningful conversation, there are no winners or losers. People should be able to walk away from an interaction feeling respected and heard, even if no minds were really changed in that conversation. So to demonstrate some of this, we challenge students to put these norms into action. So like I was saying earlier, we chose a topic that is considered neutral, and choosing a topic that is considered neutral or one where students really don't have a strong stake is a great way for them to focus on and practice the skills and not get caught up in the content. So since we're already talking about sandwiches, we would often ask the question, is a hot dog a sandwich? We quickly learned that this is not a neutral topic, and students and teachers alike have really strong opinions on this, and often the debates would get pretty heated about it. we often heard that this debate often continued like well after the tour of the museum, onto the buses home, even into the classroom the rest of the week. So if you choose to facilitate a similar activity in your classroom and choose this question, just be prepared that it's going to continue for a long time. So to demonstrate, would anyone like to volunteer to take one of the sides of this debate and practice some of our norms for meaningful dialogue? We need one person to be a pro, saying that yes, a hot dog is a sandwich, and one person to oppose, saying that no, a hot dog is definitely not a sandwich. Any volunteers? This one does require you to unmute and engage in a little bit of conversation. If we don't have anyone jump in, I'm going to tap my team to do it. They've seen it plenty of times. All right, Lexi and Tamia, I think it's on you to engage in this debate and see if we can follow some of our norms of conversation.
Okay, Lexi, what side do you want to take?
I'll take the affirmative. I'll take the affirmative. Hot dog is
Okay.
a sandwich.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm opposed.
All right, Lexi, we'll start with you. Make your case.
Awesome. So I believe that a hot dog is in fact a sandwich because it is let's go with a is it a subjective truth that all like there's meat and then there's two pieces of bread or a piece of bread on each side. And if we're defining sandwiches by only having like meat, lettuce, tomato, anything you put on your sandwich, then why do we consider a grilled cheese sandwich when that's right? Exactly. So I believe like panini is also a sandwich. I believe that a hot dog is a sandwich. Tamia, try and prove me wrong.
I will. So according to Merriam-Webster, a sandwich is in fact two pieces of bread with meat, cheese, or other filling in between them. However, a hot dog has one piece of bread that is split down the middle. So I don't know if that qualifies as two separate pieces of bread. I feel like a hot dog is closer to a taco than it is a sandwich.
Okay, but what if you're out of hot dog buns and you use two pieces of bread? Now, is it still not a hot dog?
To use my subjective truth, whenever I ran out of a hot dog bun, I would just use actually one piece of bread still as the foundation of my hot dog.
I mean, that's fair too, but I'm just saying it in front of the argument.
That is way too much bread for one hot dog to put in between. So I believe I am right.
Love
I don't
it.
believe I won, but I believe I'm correct.
That's fine because I like winning.
All right, what do we think of it? Did they follow our norms of conversation? Did they show respect and suspend judgment?
I hope we did good.
I don't know if there was a little bit of judgment in there, I would say.
We could use more practice.
Yeah. I think you guys are both pretty good active listeners, I'll say that. You were definitely honest and direct. Don't know if the empathy was there all the time. And you know, they kept emotions in check for the most part. I will say, when we facilitate this activity with students, it's pretty often that we don't follow all of our norms of conversation, and students are really quick to point out that the norms were not followed, and that they need to rethink the way they're engaging in a meaningful dialogue. But anyway, this activity, it's really fun. It gets students to kind of think a little bit creatively, engage in a debate in a creative way where they hopefully don't get too emotional about it and are able to really think about the skills at hand instead of trying to defend content that they feel really strongly about. So with that, that's kind of the conclusion of our portion. I wanted to provide a little bit of context for some of our activities that we facilitate, the way that we bring museum pedagogy into the classroom and working with students in different ways. If you'd like to further explore any of our Young Heroes Outreach Program curriculum, or even participate in the program yourself, if you're a 4th through 8th grade teacher, we're happy to continue the conversation and provide you with some more information. If you would also like to further explore our Truth exhibition and its related resources, we do have an educator resource guide that's available on our website. Both of these will be available in some links that we'll send in a follow-up email from CCE. And then we're happy to continue the conversation. I'll share my contact information in there as well. But thank you so much to CC for having us. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Donna to share some CCE resources.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you to the National Liberty Museum team and everyone. When we were brainstorming this session, it was exciting that both of our organizations had new projects and programs related to civil discourse coming out and together around the same time. So we thought, what a great way to kind of like literally and figuratively keep the conversation going about civil discourse. And so we're going to take it in a slightly different direction, but not really. And you'll see how it all comes together. So this phrase, civil discourse is the engine of American democracy. Emily and Michael and I had the opportunity to spend a couple quality days with some other museum and historical site leaders and civic ed organizations in Williamsburg, and we had a visit by Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, who said this, and we don't know if he said it originally, but we really liked it. So it really kind of put a fine point on why we know that civil discourse is so important. And so to that end, we created a toolkit. You can go to the next slide. First I want to explain more why civil discourse is so important. Because it's not just something we do in the classroom, and it's not just a right we have, going back to Jenna's mention of the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. It's not just our right to be able to speak freely to one another, it's our responsibility. And it's through that discourse that we continue as a citizenry, as an active citizenry and a constitutional democracy, to strive for that more perfect union. So with that as our framing, we set out to create a civil discourse toolkit, and I'll share a little bit more about that, and then you all are going to participate in it. So it lives on our website. It's a 5-module curriculum. It was funded by the Lenore Annenberg Civic Mission of the Nation Initiative. We worked in conjunction with Anne Arundel Community College. So we created it with a community college audience in mind, but it actually, as it lives, it's 100% applicable to a high school classroom. And it can, the toolkit itself can 100% be implemented at any age level. You would just do some accommodating and reformatting and choosing different content pieces, but the process is the same. Civil discourse can take place in everything from a kindergarten classroom, to anyone out and about in society, or in any public setting. What you'll see as we go deep into this is that it's an inquiry-based curriculum, and you'll see that anchored as we, in a minute, will engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And you'll see that it involves a lot of different types of media, one of them featuring our 60-second Civics Daily podcast, which actually the center just hit their 5,000th episode. So it's an exciting landmark, and 25 of those episodes live in this toolkit. And you'll also see that it focuses on using primary documents and foundational learning in our country's democratic and constitutional history as a basis for finding that common ground. A lot of the strategies and themes that Jenna highlighted, we've kind of baked right in. What is our common ground? Can we start from a common root of understanding and then bring it into the present tense with the issues and events that are important for us to discuss in civil ways today. And one of the coolest things, and you'll get a chance to click around, is that we have recorded the use of this toolkit in action. So you'll actually have like a way to see it in action in addition to figuring out how to use it in your own context. So there are 5 different modules: principles of the Constitution, political parties, women's rights, civil rights, citizenship, just some light, fun topics that, we could have had 50 different topics, but we thought that these 5 as a starting point are things that relate to just about anything that's going on today. And you can find a through line pretty easily, whether it's in what you're teaching in your class or what you want to discuss in an open forum, with neighbors or anywhere else. Next. So today we're going to dive into the citizenship, and so citizenship module. And so I want everyone, let's see, what age group should we pretend like we are? Let's just aim for high school. We won't do middle school. That might take us into too far off the off the ledge. Let's pretend like we're high school students, but you can also just engage as the full adults that you are. You can also try to imagine, okay, this is the group that I'm normally teaching, whether it's a classroom setting or a different type of educational setting, and just always think about your own context as we do this. So, but I do want you to put on the learner hat, and you're going to pretend like you're a student in this classroom together with me for the next couple minutes, and then you'll have a chance to like look around for yourself, and we'll have some open discussion. So the inquiry question that's part of the citizenship module is, what does it mean to be an American citizen? So I want you to think about this question, and you can use the chat. And if we're a small enough group, if you want to come off mute, you can also voice your answer too. But what does it mean to be a member of something? And what are some different types of memberships? Having a shared goal or interest, thank you. Being part of something bigger than yourself. Means you're part of a group or a team, being supported by others. Participation, associated with other people that share some kind of identity or interest. Joining a group. Everyone has a role to play. That's good. What are some types of memberships? Belonging. I love that, Ernan. What are some types of memberships that you might have, or that someone in your family has? Like, what are you members of? Clubs. That's good. If you're in school, you're listing off all the clubs that you're in. If you're a student, religious community, great. Family. You're a member of a family. That's huge. That's great. Thank you, Tamia. Yep. Professional sports teams for sure. A friend group. Yeah, I love there's all these very formal and informal. And what comes with that membership? Think about one or more of the groups or types of memberships you just listed. What comes with that membership? A sense of belonging. A commitment. At times there's friction. Access. Yep. People you can rely on, shared responsibilities and values. Yep. It can be annoying to be a member of some groups, Vicky. Ability to connect with people. Excellent. Privileges. It's interesting. So we're getting to like the things that are additive, and also things that if you're not a member, you don't get, right? Security, great. Yeah, so if you're a member of something, you have a responsibility to that group of which you are a member. And maybe it's responsibilities. Okay, next slide. Thinking about all of this, how is membership similar to citizenship? And notice citizenship, citizenship, capital C, lowercase c, we're not talking about citizenship as in American citizenship, although that's kind of the focus of what we're going. But for now, how do you see membership as being similar to or related to citizenship? In both cases, you have a concern for the common good, rights and responsibilities. Excellent. Ooh, a role to play, getting into that responsibility part, being a small part of the whole. Different perspectives are involved. So just as you all identified ways you experience your membership in smaller groups, in your family and clubs, sports teams, religious groups, this classroom, what you experience there is something you also expect to experience as part of your citizenship, a sense of belonging, responsibilities, access, shared identity. Excellent. Okay, next slide. So taking this into some deeper content now, can non-citizens exemplify citizenship in the United States? And so I'm seeing lots of yeses and emphatic yeses. So use the chat or come off mute. Explain how you know that, or explain why you believe that. Anyone can work towards the betterment of the community and society as a whole. So exercising those responsibilities, you don't have to be a citizen, but you can exercise those same responsibilities and commitments towards the community.
Everybody has the opportunity to exemplify, or can I exemplify? So yeah, I said yes, but are we excluding people from being able to exemplify?
So if membership / citizenship brings with it access, and you don't have that access, you're not always able to exemplify those same things. Madison, do you want to say more about that? Belonging is not limited to your access to the membership. That's interesting.
I think there's something related to how we see, how we perceive someone's citizenship. So like your ability to assimilate and belong is not necessarily limited by how you perform citizenship.
Yeah. So in other words, you know, some of the aspects, and we'll quote unquote, we'll learn about a lot of these. Some of the more formal legal aspects of citizenship, you don't necessarily have to perform to experience the belonging piece or to be part of that community akin to citizenship as part of being a member somewhere. Citizenship is a construct. So as a citizen of the world, or someone who is in any relationship with another person, can participate in action that can be the same as those members. Yep. 14th Amendment protects rights to life, liberty, and property. So that would extend to citizens and non-citizens. Excellent. You don't have to be a member to uphold those values, which make you a citizen. Excellent. And that we, you know, and that we appreciate as citizens. Excellent. Well, this is the kind of thing we could go on like this for a long time. If you're doing this opening, this engage activity with your students, no matter, you know, whatever age group or experience level or background knowledge, you would think about how to structure that conversation. And just so you know, the lesson plan and all the steps for this are in the toolkit. So I just did like the fourth wall. So now we're popping back in. We'll go to the next part. What we'll continue to do is deepen our connection to what we're going to learn about. Now, remember, this was written for a community college / high school level audience. So if you're, again, thinking about younger students, you would think about how to use the Chinese Exclusion Act or what background knowledge they might have on it. But to to get into a really great dialogue or discourse coming up about what it means to be an American citizen, we're going to kind of compare and contrast two things, two opposing forces in America, which is inclusion and exclusion. And some of you mentioned that directly and kind of got into that in our opening engage conversation. So we're going to look at two key sources, and then let's pretend like we've got a ton of other background knowledge. But the Chinese Exclusion Act was a significant piece of U.S. legislation passed in 1882. This was the first time a specific ethnic or national group was prohibited from immigrating. It was aimed at Chinese laborers arriving in large numbers, and effectively halted Chinese immigration for 10 years and declared Chinese immigrants ineligible for naturalization and as U.S. citizens. So that's some background on it. And what we would continue to do is read pieces of the Chinese Exclusion Act and break that open to find out what, why it was passed and what impact it had on citizenship, and not just for the Chinese who were excluded, but everyone in the country. So keep going. Next slide. And so what we're going to do now, so we'll talk about that some more. If you want to use the chat to kind of ruminate about inclusion versus exclusion in our country's history, you can do that. And so that's where you would take the conversation with your students once you looked at that text. To continue to build background knowledge, because remember, one of the operating principles of the toolkit and of having successful civil discourse is to make sure that everyone is coming from an equal place and a good foundation of knowledge. So we're not just committing some of the fallacies that Jenna pointed out earlier, which is like attacking the person or arguing from a place of emotion, but instead we're rooted in a common understanding of history and foundational ideas and principles. So what we do in the next piece is we're going to go deep and start building everyone's background knowledge, but in bite-sized ways. So we have our 60-second Civics daily podcast, and we have a series of 5 of those podcasts about citizenship. And so we'll play the first one just so you all can see what it's like. And then I'm going to give you a chance to click around and look at some of the others. So I'm going to, hit play. Welcome to 60-Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Donna Phillips. Today we introduce our series on citizenship in America as part of our Civil Discourse and American Legacy project. We are joined by special guest Professor Henry L. Chambers, Jr. of University of Richmond School of Law. Welcome, Professor Chambers.
Good to see you.
Thank you, you too. Professor Chambers, what was citizenship at the founding of our country?
Citizenship at the founding of our country was somewhat unclear. When we knitted ourselves together through the Constitution, we had the 13 different states, and there was state citizenship. But each state had a slightly different way of looking at its own citizenship. So what happened was when the states came together, the American citizenship was just an amalgamation of all 13 citizenships next to one another. So there was a little bit of a lack of clarity. There was a recognition that citizenship mattered, however, and we see that, for example, in the Constitution, where only natural-born citizens or people who were citizens of the United States at the time of the framing were considered eligible for running for president. That tells us that citizenship mattered, but it didn't tell us what citizenship actually was.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Chambers. That is all for today's podcast. 60-Second Civics. Stop it. Oh gosh, get off of that screen too. No. So that's the first of 5, and then we even have a long form 15 to 20 minute video with with Professor Chambers going even deeper. So it goes chronologically. So that might be the first one that you play for students. And I put a question in the chat. If you go to the next slide, what are some of the main ideas or questions or thoughts that you have listening to that? So I'll give you a chance to put a few in the chat or to say them out loud, because 60 seconds isn't a whole lot of time to go deep, right? But it should serve to generate more questions for students and pique their interest into different aspects of the topic. Yeah, shocked by how much information was in those 60 seconds. There was a lot. And so you also might want to play it more than once for students, because there is really good content, even though it is only 60 seconds. Yeah, Kelly, how might the definition of citizenship been different if groups like women, people of African descent, Indigenous persons, and immigrants were at the table or had been included from the get-go? What did it look like in each of the colonies? Citizenship has always been confusing. Vicky, now we're seeing the foundation of some of the confusion, and that it was an amalgamation of these state concepts of citizenship. So already we have even more questions that we want to explore more deeply. Excellent. If you go to the next slide, Emily, what I would like to do is give everyone a chance to go into the toolkit and click around. Now we're going to pull you back well before you get everything done you want to get done. But there's a link in the chat. And if you go in, you can see the other videos that are lined up there on the landing page. So for all 5 modules, you have this type of landing page, and you, as an instructor, you can figure out how best to have the students interact with this media to continue building their background knowledge. So why don't we give it like 2 minutes, and then as you're clicking around, maybe just use the chat or come off mute and put anything, anything that interests you or that you notice or questions you have. This is like your instructor hat, like questions you have about the toolkit itself or the videos. Any ahas or quick thoughts or questions? You're just so stunned by the brilliant narrator of the videos. Stunned into silence. Yes, Hank is terrific. Hank is the star. That's why we chose these. The other scholars are brilliant too. It was hard choosing one. And I just love all the topics too. So like, it's like choosing your favorite child. Hank is really, really good. And I think that Hank and the other scholars across the other 5 modules do a really great job of breaking down the constitutional and historical foundation for the topic, building it up with us chronologically, and then in those longer form videos, going deeper and kind of pulling it all together. There are discussion guides that go with the longer form videos. There are short questions that go with the 60-second civics videos. There are transcripts that go with each of those. So a lot of really great accessibility features for you to use in your classroom setting. Yes, the new Colossus is the companion text to the Japanese Exclusion Act. And it's a poem. It is, thank you, Kelly. It is good and interdisciplinary. And it's a way, like I was saying, to juxtapose the inclusion, the messages of inclusion that the nation has had versus exclusion. And that comes out really strongly in the civil discourse model. So go to the next slide, Emily. Next slide. Awesome. So what comes after this is, as you're building the student's background and continuing to build their interest and using the different media, then you want them to go deeper and start to pull together some concrete foundational learning. So I'm going to give you another chance to click around. And this is when you go into the body of the lesson or the session plan itself. And you'll see that everything referenced is downloadable, customizable. You'll see there's a close reading template that you can use for every single text, depending on how much guidance you want your students to have in accessing the text. And then all the step-by-step full directions for teachers, plus opportunities to extend or to modify in different ways. Okay, so I think we're getting late in the night, and so I know you're probably still clicking around, and that's fine. And please continue to use the chat if you have anything you noticed or want to ask a question about. But I want to move us deeper into the inquiry model. So we've engaged, we explored through the different media. Explain was kind of deepening our understanding with the reading and tying together those beginning ideas from the videos in with text and more historical context. So the elaborate part of our inquiry is now deepening our learning through civil dialogue or discourse. And the toolkit has two different types of dialogue models to choose from. And you could do both, you could do one or the other. And I will tell you that I have seen both of these used with, like I said before, kindergarten all the way through adult learners. So we provide you everything to do that. So I wouldn't use, the new Colossus as is or the Chinese Exclusion Act with your kindergartners as is, but you get the idea. The format is what applies across the board. A Paideia seminar is similar to a Socratic seminar. There's a little more structure and kind of routine, almost ceremonial routine to it. It's a collaborative and thought-provoking dialogue. It's always centered around a text. Sometimes there's two texts. And then it's facilitated with open-ended questions. And I'm going to show you a brief clip of what it looks like in action. The structured academic controversy, and use the chat to tell me if you've ever heard of either of these. That one is you're assigned a stance. And I love the way Jenna kind of previewed a type of that type of dialectic with her teammates, taking a stance on whether a hot dog was a sandwich. But you're assigned a stance. You have time to do research and pull together your best arguments. You work collaboratively, and then it's a timed dialectical exercise, and then you actually switch sides, and then you work to come to a consensus. So in both cases, a lot of the norms that we mentioned earlier in our session are maintained all throughout. And neither one is there a winner or a loser, right? It's not about the person either. And in both cases, but in very different ways, the participants and your students are pushed to expand what they're thinking, consider new viewpoints, take the other side in different ways. And in both cases, they come away with very different understandings of the topic than they originally had. They just do it in two very different ways. So we included both. But we also want to make sure you knew how to do them. So in the toolkit, we actually provide videos to show what it looks like, and in both models, as well as how to set up for them. So I think there's a link, Emily, on that image. Maybe.
You'd like to do the round robin? Or the full one?
Go to, if you want to, it doesn't, let's see, go to minute 28:40 in the full one. I just wanted to show, so what we did is we captured every single aspect of the toolkit in action. So you could see examples of how to implement it. And again, this is with adult learners because it was with community college members. And then you could hit the big screen, expand the screen. Yeah, just go to 28.
28. Got it.
Ish, 28:40. I mean, any minute of this is awesome, but okay, that's good.
The trend's going to need to be to combat that. Is that what you mean? Do you see constructive element? Because I would agree that there's a bit of activism in that. He's acknowledging the problems of human government and organization. But do you mean that it's pessimistic that he's kind of inventorying those vices of human organizational thought, providing a framework?
Yes, I do think it's a framework. I think too, if you compare it to, I mean, you brought up Plato earlier. I think we could complicate this. We sat down for a week or whatever. The most simple, basic, Wikipedia, what is Plato and what does Aristotle say? I think Plato and Aristotle with Sixth Sense and Aquinas through the Middle Ages, they wanted to make people better. Madison doesn't care to make people better because then he also I think he knows it will warp human beings, because like, well, who's better, right? Like, whose idea of better should win? Should it be the Catholic Church's? It was for a long time. And so instead of trying to make people better, we'll meet them where they are and build a system that at least doesn't allow them to do the worst, even if it doesn't make them better. I think that's what's going on here, and that's also why, again, I find it very persuasive.
I would agree with Jonathan and Vicky that he's recognizing that people aren't angels, but I think it goes through some of the other founding fathers. You know, Hamilton said the same thing, that human nature is rotten, and that everybody should be viewed as a rascal, a scoundrel. Let's see, George Washington said that the whole idea of being virtuous is gone. People don't put the country first. You can't trust them to put the country first. And so I think several of them recognize that human nature is so great. And so he's saying, okay, it's not great, but we got to deal with it. How do we deal with this? So that's human nature. And John Adams, you know, same thing. Adams said that everybody's governed by passion. The passion, you know, they're jealous of others because they're not being talked about. They're greedy, they're ambitious, and that's what governs everybody. So I think he's recognizing these human frailties that we all have.
Do you see
You can push pause, Emily.
fire part of the analogy of
Thank you. If I played it long enough, we would have heard from
liberty
Emily
is
and
to
Vicky, who were part of the creation of the toolkit. So that exemplified one of the political parties modules. But in the toolkit, you can access how to do both dialogues from beginning to end in real time and see what it looks like. So along with the written directions, you have the video that shows what it looks like with a group of 20 people. Yes, your favorite SAC reflection question is, what's the best thing said by folks you disagree with? Yeah, the protocols for both really call for, you know, they really push the participants into this space of acknowledging what the other side is saying, and really valuing their contribution to the conversation. I've never seen two models do that as well as both of these two do. And again, in two very different ways, but I think it really does serve to create this lived experience for the students and the people participating in it that they can carry out in the classroom, about what it means to be empathetic and to truly listen to the other side, but also try to come from the same basis for understanding. If you go to the next slide, as I mentioned, there's a whole how to use the toolkit. So the inquiry model, which we talked about with the 5 E's, has exemplar videos in there. And then both of the discourse models, you can see video examples of those too. And then I will pause here and just turn it back to everyone. So you're welcome to click a little bit more into the links, but also just come off mute. I don't know if you all can hear my dog or not. I think someone's home. How do the features of the toolkit support civil discourse? How might the content features or structures, there's a typo, of the toolkit be adapted for your context? And then bringing it back to our theme for tonight's session, how might engagement in civil discourse establish a climate, culture, and context for civic action? You have 6 minutes to answer all those questions and solve all the problems. Yeah, thank you, Jenna. It starts off with simple questioning and ideating and gets deeper and deeper. Provides great scaffolding for understanding. Thank you. That's what we hope happens when people use it. And we work with a lot of stakeholder groups to decide on the final format and topic. And one of the concerns, and especially if you're not a traditional educator in the classroom, especially in the social studies classroom, where they might be more familiar and comfortable with having these types of engagements with students, you know, the fear is, what if this goes off the rails? You know, what if it's just like people just escalate, emotions escalate? and starting at that level and going deeper and deeper together as the journey with the class to get to the point where you have the dialogue, I think really lays the groundwork for making sure it doesn't escalate into all of those, you know, going against the norms that you establish for other parts of your classroom. Yeah, it leads to increased empathy, allows people to see issues and perspectives of others. Yeah, making them take a side they normally wouldn't, that's huge. That really pushes students' learning. Yeah, I like how you said that to me. It can facilitate civic action to allow for a synthesis of people's thoughts to come together. So listening to each other in either the SAC or the Paideia seminar can spur those ideas of like, oh yeah, that is something we could do about this problem in the course of those conversations. And Vicky and Emily, who are filmed in this, might remember, like by the time we were done with the Paideia seminar, you know, people's minds were spinning like, oh yeah, you know, there are solutions, you know, it's making me think about something that could be done or could be different. Yeah, Madison, mirror the SAC structure to activate prior knowledge, but allows for movement, but consensus building practice. Yeah. SAC is cool. SAC is kind of like, it's frenetic, but it's like really cool because it's very structured in time, and students, some students feel very safe in that, you know? Yep. And then trying to build like that consensus. Well, great. Keep the thoughts and ideas coming, and I will turn it back over to Emily and Jenna to wrap us up. And I thank you all for sticking with us tonight and taking a quick jaunt into some civil discourse.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your participation this evening. We really appreciate it. We hope that you have come away with a lot of great ideas and a lot of amazing new resources that you can use in your classroom or with whichever audiences you typically work with. We will be sending out the recording of the video afterwards. And as Jenna said, we'll also be sharing links to many additional resources as well. So with that, thank you to Jenna, thank you to Donna, and thank you to all of you. And we look forward to seeing all the good coming in the world of your efforts to work with your students to build a more just and equitable society. So thank you all so much. Our speakers might be willing to stick around for a couple extra minutes if you have any final questions, but thank you again.